Hey guys, welcome to the Broken But Not Forever podcast. My name is Chelsie and I'm your host. Today I have three very special people in the room and they have a story that is full of hardship, but also one that will greatly encourage your faith. So I actually feel so humbled to have them here and just have their time and be willing to share. And so without further ado, I'd love to introduce Amanda and Russ and Karen Lloyd. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I am so grateful y'all are here. And you even have to travel home after this.
I do have to travel home after this.
Hour and a half?
Yeah, it's about an hour and a half.
Well, let's get into it. I wanted to kind of talk about Amanda. When I first met you, and Robbie and I were talking about this earlier today, we were in my mom's living room. I believe it was in 2021. Mm-hmm. And we were sitting at the dinner table and I had never met you before. I knew that you were going to Awaken Church at the time. Mm-hmm. And my mom was just saying, she's awesome. I think Miss Beth might have been there too.
She was.
Okay, she was. Okay. Mm-hmm. My memory is bad. And you just kind of started sharing your story with me. And I think you were helping my mom navigate the time, some things that were going on with a family member. And
right.
You started sharing your story with us, and I just remember at that time just feeling like, oh my goodness, like this lady's been through a lot, and look how strong she is. And I just left encouraged, but also like, man, I could not imagine, but seeing also how you pointed your story to God. And I just would love to kind of rewind and kind of take us back to that moment and whatever you're comfortable sharing, just kind of like what that story is and why we're all here today.
Okay. It's hard to try to put my finger on where to start. Well, I have three children and I had my oldest when I was 16. I was a teenage mom, barely made it beyond high school. I mean, it was a struggle. My boys are super close together in age. They're only 11 months apart. Thick as thieves, the best of friends. And then I have a daughter who is about 8 years younger than my oldest son. So, those are my three, but I want to say it was maybe the middle of my oldest son, Brandon's junior year of high school. He played football and he got hurt. He sustained an injury to his back that physically was catastrophic to him as a teenage boy. And, you know, as a mother, you take your child to the doctor, you follow the medical recommendations. Right. And that was what I did. And I trusted the physicians. And about a year later, Brandon entered into a phase of his treatment called pain management therapy. And that was where we took a pretty sharp turn. And I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't know about it for years, but that was a pivotal point in both of our lives, in all of our lives. And, so he went on to graduate high school. He completed pain management therapy. You know, and he went to college. I thought that we had that behind us. He did still, experience some pain from the injury, but he was improving. And it happened pretty quickly. But then I started to notice a change in behavior patterns. There were a lot of things. Yeah. There were a lot of things. And I didn't really know what was going on. I had no clue what had happened. You know, I didn't realize that we had taken that sharp turn a few years earlier, but Brandon started to experience a social and professional decline that happened so rapidly that it was hard to deny at that point that something was very wrong. And I had my suspicions, but I definitely didn't want to admit it. Because if you admit it, then it becomes real. When you say it out loud, it's definitely real. And I thought that the issues were maybe something that would just run its course. Um, I had never really had any experience and never encountered anyone else in my life that suffered from substance use disorder, or as most people know it, as addiction. And Brandon's addiction started with his pain management therapy. And once pain management therapy ended, um, Brandon knew. Brandon knew that he couldn't function. He just could not end the prescriptive part of his pain management therapy. And
Yeah.
he started using other avenues to feed that habit. And he was functional. He was successful. He was still very present. And so when I say there were red flags, they were red flags that if you weren't his mother, if you weren't his grandparents, you probably wouldn't know. And a lot of people tell me, looking back in hindsight, that they were subtle changes. And sometimes those changes occur as a man matures, but it was just definitely out of character for who Brandon really was, because he was such a gentle, kind-hearted person. When you would encounter one of those sharp edges, you just knew that it wasn't truly who he was. So I want to say it was 2017. No, 2018. The beginning of 2018, Brandon lost his job. He had lost his relationship. Things were starting to spiral out of control for him. And as a family, we wanted to confront the issue head on. We felt like, what better time than now? You know, he's
Right.
starting to lose control of things in his life. Everyone says that when you hit rock bottom, like, where else do you have to go but up? But Brandon wasn't ready to admit that he had a problem, not because he wanted to keep feeding the habit. It was because he did not want to disappoint his family. He was, he was humiliated. So my family and I knew that we were running out of time, and everyone was feeling pretty desperate. And I didn't really feel desperate yet, because I am always a take charge kind of mom. If there is a problem, we will spearhead it. We'll do it together. You don't ever have to do it alone. But I didn't know what this was, and I didn't have any experience. I wasn't educated about what was happening. So my family and I staged an intervention, and we were going to join forces, but Brandon was pretty smart. He was onto us, and he ran, and he was missing for a few days. And when you have a child that's in their 20s and they don't live at home anymore, law enforcement is very reluctant to help you, even to listen to you. I heard a lot, well, I can't make your son talk to you, ma'am. And that wasn't what I wanted. I didn't want them to want them to make him talk to me. I wanted them to make sure that he was alive and that he wasn't in danger. But they they weren't very much help. And I woke up one morning after on the fourth day, and I had just had enough. And I went to social media, and I shared that my son was missing, and I shared what was wrong, and I shared why I was concerned. I shared who he was with last, that I could validate. And it was within hours that post started being shared, and within hours it was like 15,000 shares out there. And I was getting a phone call from Brandon at a gas station to come and pick him up. And so I went and picked him up, and I brought him home. And it took us about a month after that day to be able to to be able to align all of the resources that it was going to take for his rehabilitation. And he was willing. He didn't want to hide anything. He just didn't want to live like that anymore. So we found a place in Anderson, South Carolina called the Haven of Rest, and we traveled there together. And that's where he would live for the next year. And during that month, when we were in search of what turned out to be the Haven of Rest, Brandon and I started going to church, and we church shopped a little bit, but there just wasn't anywhere that really felt like home until we attended a service at the Leeds Avenue Awaken. And we kept going back. And after I took him to Anderson, I kept going back. And I knew that what my son was facing was bigger than me. It was bigger than him. And if there was going to be any hope that he was going to make it to the other side of it, that it wasn't going to be anyone here that I could talk to or that I could trust with my child, that I was going to have to take it. I was going to have to take it to the cross. And that's what I did. And I took him there in May of 2018. And on July 15th of 2018, Brandon called me. It was a Saturday, and he said, or he actually called me the day before. And he said, "Mom, I've got something really important I want to tell you. I know that I don't have a call scheduled with you, but I just wanted to share something with you. I wanted to tell you I'm getting baptized tomorrow." And my initial reaction was, it's so late in the day already. Like, I can't be there. I don't have enough time to tell everyone. Can you do it next Sunday instead? And he told me no. He said, "No, Mom, this is not for you. This is for me." And that day plays such a pivotal moment in the next year, the next 365 days of our lives, because Brandon graduated the program early, 3 months early, and I brought him home in February of 2019. And he hit the ground running. I mean, he was just making so much progress. He gave me his journals to read, and reading about his relationship with Jesus and how he never thought that he could live a sober life, how he never thought that he could be successful. He never felt like he would be welcomed back home. And he was. And then 5 months later, I was at a concert on Daniel Island, and I got a phone call that Brandon's girlfriend was trying to find him. She had left to go out of town that morning because she hadn't been able to reach him. And she wanted to know if he was with me. And I knew that they had a complicated relationship. So I excused myself from the crowd, and I sent him a text, and I told him, I was like, "Hey, I just got this message. I'm just checking in on you. Are you okay? I won't say anything. You don't have to tell me where you are or anything, but I at least need for you to check in with me." And he was never the son that doesn't respond, ever. I had even talked to him that morning. We had made plans for the next day and through the weekend. And when he didn't respond, I knew that something was terribly wrong. So I went on my phone. I started checking jail lists. He had never been to jail, but who knows? Anything could happen. And he wasn't in jail. So I started calling hospitals. And the hospital closest to our home was Trident Medical Center. And when I called the emergency department at Trident Medical Center, there was a doctor that got on the phone with me and told me that my son had been admitted, and that I needed to make it to the hospital as soon as possible. And I asked if he'd been in a car accident. He said, "Ma'am, I can't tell you anything else." And I disclosed my son's substance use disorder to the doctor. And I told him, I said, "Does this have anything to do with why he's been admitted there?" And he said, "I can answer yes, but I can't tell you anything else. You just need to get here." And I the last thing I said to the doctor, I thanked him and I told him, I said, will you please just let him know that I'm on my way?
Right.
Just please let him know that I will be there soon and that I'm on my way. And I hung up the phone, and some friends and I had been dropped off at the concert. I didn't have a vehicle. I've had very little phone service out there, and I called an Uber, and I was just throwing cash at this Uber driver. I said, I'll pay your insurance premiums. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll pay your tickets if you just please don't stop. Please just get me there as soon as you can. And when I got to the hospital, I had already sounded the alarm to my parents because they lived right around the corner from the hospital. So my mom and dad were there already. And the emergency department knew who I was when I came running in the door, and they took me right back. But no one told me anything. And they escorted me into a room where my mom was standing next to my son, and he was on life support. He had he had relapsed and he had overdosed. And and it was a room about the size of this one. There were no windows, and the sounds of all these machines were just like bouncing off the walls, and I felt like I was going crazy a little bit. Like my mind was playing tricks on me, or my eyes were playing tricks on me. And um I mean, I probably had the reaction that any mother would have. I don't really remember, but I do remember my mom. I remember my mom trying to comfort me and telling me that that we couldn't wake him up, that we needed to let him rest, and that was all she knew. And I remember laying across him and just crying out because I knew that there was no changing. I knew that this was it. And the first prayer that I started to pray was just out loud, and I was just crying and screaming and just praying that if God didn't take him fast, he just needed to go ahead and take me with him. And then my mom fell to pieces. She was trying to be strong for me, but that really scared her. So that was late Thursday night. And first thing Friday morning, there was a care team that came through. They moved us to the ICU, and I kept asking what was next, and no one could tell me. And they were like, well, we don't know. Like, we don't know if he'll improve. I said, I'm not asking what's next for him. Like, I'm asking what's next for me. And we had some really hard conversations, and I signed a DNR that morning.
Yeah.
Because I was scared of all of it. I was scared if he lived. I was scared if he died. But in those moments, I was more scared of failing him than anything else. Like, the decisions that I made were the only decisions that were left. And they told me when I signed the DNR that I said, okay, so when can we do this? I wanted it over. And I knew, I knew that Brandon wasn't coming back. And if he did, he wasn't coming back like he left. But they told me that there is something called due diligence, which is a 3-day period of time that they had to keep him on all of these machines. And they had to monitor his risk and his respiratory rates and his response to different tests that they performed. And that was when I realized that at the end of those 3 days that there was something else that had to be, there was another decision to be made. And they told me that after those 3 days, if there was no improvement, then they could turn all of the machines off, but that I would have to make that call. And this was within the first 24 hours, probably within the first 12 hours. And that was what really sent me over the edge. I stayed in that room, and there were so many people there. Every time I left the room, it was just interference everywhere. And a lot of people were upset because they knew that I had signed a DNR, and they were, saying things like, well, you should just give him more time than that. You shouldn't make any decisions today. And there's just a lot of interference.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started praying that I couldn't take it another 2 days, but also I couldn't do that. In 3 days, I couldn't do it. I signed the DNR that I didn't want any life-saving measures taken, but to take what was giving him life, I couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't do it. And so then I found out Saturday that they wouldn't be able to perform the tests that were required to take the next step until Monday. Mm. And I had been praying and nothing had changed. And if you've ever seen someone with a traumatic brain injury, which was what happened on life support, it's one of the most brutal things that I think I've ever witnessed. And there was no peace, and there was no rest, and everything was so loud, and he was having seizures, and he was sweating. And I left the hospital early Sunday morning, and I went to church. Mm-hmm. And I prayed for mercy, and I remember that morning, I always sat in the back because I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to connect with people, but I did want to go. And that day I picked the seat as close as I could find it because I couldn't tolerate any more interference. I just needed an answer. I knew that was the end of things, the end of the way that things had always been. But I knew that there had to be something else. There had to be something else. The double looks at his chart every time the shift would change. No one could believe why he was there. He was so healthy. But I needed mercy, and I felt like there was a floor to heaven that I could not break through. No matter how much I prayed, no matter what I prayed for. But I just kept praying, and I prayed and didn't stop. And I stood in the church that day as close as I could get to the worship stage. And after service was over, I went to leave, and I was in the lobby, and there was a girl on the worship team. Her name was Brittany. I'd never seen her before, but she chased me out of the church and chased me down, and she stopped me. And she said, I don't know what you brought in here today. I don't know what you are carrying with you. She said, but the Lord told me that I needed to come and I needed to find you, and I needed to tell you, I see you and he hears you.
Gives me chills.
So we cried it out for I don't know how long in the lobby, and I left. And on my way back to the hospital, I heard a commercial on the radio in the car for an organization called Sharing Hope. And I went back in the hospital and I thought to myself, this is the answer. Like, this is the answer to my prayer. I asked to talk to someone about organ donation because they wouldn't make me make those decisions if he needed to live, if his body, if his organs needed to live. And I knew enough about it to know that. And I thought, that's my answer. There is my mercy. I won't have to sign that paper if this is where we go with it. And so then I just pulled my phone out and I asked the coordinator, I said, people die on these lists every day. They don't outlive their illness or their body's failure. Can I choose who to give these organs to? And he said, absolutely. He said, do you know someone? And I said, I don't. I just wanted to know if I could pick, if I know somebody else that knows somebody else. And I sent I think it was a Facebook or an Instagram message to our church. And I just said that this was a time sensitive issue and that I needed a response immediately. But is there anyone in our church or affiliated with our church that's in need of an organ donation? And I got a response back right away that the message had been received and they would be back in touch with me within the hour. And an hour later, they asked me about blood type and the gender of the patient. And I explained that it was my son and provided the blood type. And we kind of went back and forth a little bit. And then I was given two names. And their names were Russ Lloyd and Stephen Harville. And when Monday came, the next morning, I really felt like we had to get to the end of this. Like, my living children, my parents, me, my son, I didn't know how much longer I could hold in there. But I knew that they told me that we wouldn't have to wait for all those tests to be performed if Brandon's body gave out on its own. And just after 12 o'clock, Brandon's brain herniated and the seizures stopped and the machine started to make different noises and a lot of the sounds went away. And I knew then that was it, that we can move forward, that there was other work to be done. And I felt anxiously eager to move into the next step. Like, what comes next? What about these other people? I knew my son was dying, but I knew that these other people were too. We were actually in the hospital for a few more days because there were a lot of other things to coordinate. There were a lot of other legalities. I didn't know how long that would take, but I do know that his heart had been allocated to a woman who lives in Florida. And the allocation process started all over again. because she died before they could finish the allocation paperwork. And from the moment I contacted the church to ask about anyone, I will say this, I had never made a connection to any human being in the church other than the girl Brittany. But from the moment that message went out, there were just people from the church showing up, and they just kept showing up. And they would come and find me. Sometimes I would be in the chapel. Other times I would be in his room. And they just latched on and would not let go. Some of them ended up being in my small group. But the pastor's mom, Miss Beth, that's a woman that I can definitely say throughout that whole process. She lifted me up and she prayed over me and she prayed over my son, over my living children. And she's a large contributor to the reason why I'm probably even still here today. Her prayers did not go unanswered either. And I remember afterwards, Miss Beth and I would have conversations frequently. And she would just always talk about how peaceful things seemed at the hospital. And it was, to me, it was so chaotic. Yeah. It was so chaotic and hostile, but not to her. She said that she'd been in a lot of hospital rooms before, and she said that if she had ever witnessed God's will being done, that was it. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm so sorry that that is something that you've been through. And it's so interesting when we go through something traumatic. Sometimes we don't remember the details, but then sometimes we remember every detail.
Yeah.
You know? And thank you for sharing that. And so, Russ, were you were going to awaken at the time?
We were.
Whenever you found this out? Can you kind of share how this journey started with you?
Sure. We were in a small group with Miss Beth, and I had made it known that I had a kidney issue, and they were praying for answers. At the same time, I was continually researching and trying to find ways that I felt like that I could help my kidney.
Yeah.
Outside of a transplant or outside of dialysis, even at that point in time. And I'd made a decision to go with stem cells. So we had been to Miami, and I'd had a bone marrow extraction, and they were culturing stem cells. And I was going to have the stem cells injected into my renal artery, not thinking that it would fix the kidney, but buy me more time.
Right.
It's kind of until I guess I could figure it out. And that was my plan. I don't know at that point in time that I'd actually earnestly consider what God would have me do. I was just trying to fix it myself.
Yeah.
You know? And so that was the direction we were headed in, was the stem cells. Yeah. And we got a call on Sunday afternoon, I'm pretty sure. Karen and I just happened to be sitting at the bar in our kitchen. And we were sitting talking, and Miss Beth called, and she told us what had happened, and said that they'd like me to have his kidney. And I need to back up just a bit. Yeah. About a year previous, I'd had another kidney offered to me. and we were taking our grandson on a Disney cruise, and we were already on the boat in Miami and getting ready to sail when I got that call.
Wow.
And so it was easier for me to say no then. For number one, I was doing much better then, and was still kind of in denial. And so I told them thanks, but no thanks, as nicely as I could, But when I hung up the phone, Karen and I were talking. I said, I really need to figure out what I'm going to do, because one day I'm going to get this call again.
Right.
I got to figure out what I'm going to say. Well, I did. I figured out I'm going stem cells. I don't want a transplant. That's not the route that I'm going. Right. So that afternoon when I got the offer, I told Miss Beth no. And I said that, I had a plan, and, everything I just told you about the stem cells and whatever. And I was pretty assured in my own mind, I think, that I was doing the right thing. And, but I had just been told him about Stephen the week before, that he had a transplant 5 years prior to, and it was rejecting, and he was very sick and in very, dire need of another kidney. So I said, well, I don't actually know this guy. We just told about him last week. Can I nominate him? And he, can see if he can be a match. And they said, sure. And, wasn't long after that, the word got through the contractor that told me about him. Stephen called me, and, first thing he said, we didn't know each other. He said, man, dude, I don't know you, but if you don't take this kidney, you're crazy. Mm-hmm. And so we got to talking, and we had a lot in common, and kind of really hit it off on the phone. But, I told him my whole story, that I was planning on doing stem cells, and, but I wanted to, I prayed for him on the phone that he'd be a match and that he could get the kidney, and, he'd find health again, and, I hung the phone up, and then I turned to Karen and said, what do you think I should do? Mm-hmm. And I'll let you tell that part of the story, because that's kind of, you tell it better than I do anyway.
I told him, I said, honey, excuse me, I can't tell you what to do, but these are some concerns that we have. Well, our oldest son, Rusty, had agreed to go get tested to see if he could be a match to give Russ a kidney. And although, his wife, he's married, he's got children, his wife never said, she didn't want him to do it, or she was worried about it. Worried about him having the surgery. There are never any minor surgeries, right? There's always risk associated anytime you have a procedure, even though he's young and in good health. But I was like, well, that would take that off the table. And then I said, you've got this plan. You're trying to line everything up, just perfectly. That might not be the plan.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't know. You don't know if you're going to get in an emergency situation. We don't know what tomorrow holds, but those are some things, some concerns that would be taken off the table. I said, but the main thing you need to do is you need to pray. You need to pray and ask God what God would have you do. And so that's when, we're just sitting there, and he just prayerfully sitting right there at the bar, and
well, I said no more than the Lord, just to myself. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I did, he said, man, how many kidneys I got to give you?
Wow.
And so I knew right then, without any different prayer or anything else, that this kidney was meant for me. Now I opened my eyes, and that's exactly what I told Karen. I said, Lord just told me, this is the second kidney I've already given you. I don't know how hard-headed you need to be.
Right.
But, and so I said, let me call Miss Beth back and, just make sure they hadn't already, given it to somebody else or whatever, So I called her back, and I said, Miss Beth, I said, the boy's got 2 kidneys. I said, I want to make sure Stephen, gets first chance. I said, but if y'all hadn't promised anybody else, I'd like to see if I'm a match. And she said, absolutely. And, so then, then the fun starts, right? So, we started going through the, the testing and that sort of thing, and then I'll fast forward a little bit. So we, are both determined that we're potential matches. So we go down, and this is all happening very quickly, mind you. You know, this was on Sunday and we had the surgery on Wednesday.
Right.
So, we went down on Monday night. Well, it was Monday night or Tuesday night. We went down, and that's when Stephen and I actually met for the first time. So, you know, we were in, you know, medical university, you know, together and, you know, going through the testing, and we just bonded immediately and whatnot, you know. And, so then I guess that was the night before surgery, because it was the next morning when we came in, they actually even put us in the same room together, you know. So,
Wow.
it was like, it was, I guess it seemed to them that, you know, we were either family or knew each other very well or whatever, but we just met the night before. And anyway, they put us in the same room together, and, they came in and they said that, I would be taken first, and, they'd be back in a little while to get me. So when they came back, they said, well, Mr. Lord, there's some issues. We're not 100% sure that you're a match. There's some reactivity in your blood. And, we need to do it the old school way. We need to have the organ present and, blend it with your lymph nodes and wait 7 hours to see if there's any reactivity or anything. But we're going to go ahead and take Stephen, that he's 100% match. So they took Stephen, and, you know, I laid there, you know, all day waiting to find out whether I was going to be a match or not. And, I finally gotten just kind of weary and tired because I was excited that morning. Then I'm kind of, you know, kind of thinking it's not going to happen. So the surgeon came by, and he was standing at the foot of my bed when he came by, and, we were talking, and then I told him, I said, Doc, man, I was really excited this morning thinking surely I was going to get a kidney today. But I said, you know, at this point in time, it'd be a miracle, right?
Yeah.
And he said, well, he just kind of nodded. He said, yeah, it'd be a miracle. And the Holy Spirit just in that moment said, but God. And I said it out loud. I said, but God. And I think in that moment, I was assured that I was going to be a match and I was going to get the kidney. But at the same time, you know, you got your flesh, you know, this doubting, you know. So the doctor left, and then a little while later, a nurse came by and she said, hey, I'll be back to get you in a few minutes. You know, it's time for your surgery. And I said, I'm a match? And she was like, what do you mean? I said, well, I've been laying here all day long waiting to find out whether, you know, I was going to be a match or not. And, she said, I just came on shift. Nobody tells me anything. Let me go check. I'll be right back. So she never came back.
Wow.
But they came to get me. And I'm like, I'm a match. I'm a match. So all the way going down to the, you know, anesthesia room, I'm asking everybody I lock eyes with if I'm a match. And, while they were putting the mask over my nose, telling me to breathe, I'm asking them, I'm a match. And they're like, breathe. And so it didn't take long to figure out I was a match. So, but they had told me before I went under, when I first got in there, they said, don't be alarmed. Said, you know, when you wake up, more than likely it's going to take a couple of days for the kidney to wake up and start working and whatnot. So you're more than likely going to be on dialysis. And, that's a part of my story that, my kidney was crashing, but I had not gotten quite to emergency dialysis yet. I was like just one measure off. So I never actually had dialysis.
Wow.
And, so anyway, when I did wake up, first thing I asked him, I said, I thought they were getting ready to start. So y'all getting ready to start. They said, son, you got a perfectly functioning kidney. So we stitched it up, it turned pink, and it went to work immediately. So from that day forward, my lab works have been perfect. I've never been a measure off. I guess it was 2 weeks after the transplant, I think it was. Brandon's kidney was working so good that I got completely dehydrated. And wild thing about it is Stephen got completely dehydrated at the exact same time. So we were sitting side by side in the hospital getting infusions to bring, our level of hydration back up. Brandon was a big strapping fella. And the average adult kidney weighs 8 ounces. His weighed 2 pounds. Wow. They told me I'd have a 3-inch scar. I got a 9-inch scar. So I got a really good kidney.
Wow.
That kidney works way better than my 2 kidneys ever worked. My blood work has been perfect every single time since. And even better than that, so has Stephen's. He's never had a bad mark on any lab test he's ever had either, and he's living perfectly healthy, and so am I. To this
Wow.
day, and we have a man to thank for that. And so it was, every time she tells a story, it breaks my heart all over again.
Yeah.
It's been almost 7 years.
While we were waiting, we were waiting to get so we didn't know, if things were going to
Right.
work out or not. I get this lovely text on my phone, and it's from Amanda. She had reached out and had gotten my cell phone number, and here is a mom who has just gone through the absolute worst pain a mother can ever go through, losing their child. And she would take the time to text me to tell me that, she's got a whole village of loved ones that are praying for us to have a successful surgery. I knew right then and there what kind of woman she is, that she would take the time to do that. Honestly, I would have to say, I don't know that would even be something I would even think about, if I had been walking that journey.
Right.
And there will never be words. There will never be words.
That's for sure.
To express the gratitude and appreciation that we have.
I'm living, in the victory of this, and so thankful and so healthy, and every time that's what I get ready to say. Every time I hear Amanda recant a story, it breaks my heart all over again.
Right.
It's hard to know that someone had to lose their life.
Yeah. Yeah.
For someone
Absolutely.
to have life.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But it's been, we are, that's a great word to use. We are, Stephen and I, not to mention all the other people, that also got either transplants or tissue or whatever, all the different, usable donations that were given. There were multiple lives that were touched. It's just so wild that, Stephen and I were right here in town.
Yeah.
We're in the same church, and it's the odds of Stephen and I both getting a kidney from the same individual that, we didn't even know, let alone being related to,
Right.
The odds of both of us getting that kidney from the same person has got to be way more than even winning the lottery.
Yeah.
It's
so rare, even the circumstances, like.
It would literally, we could sit here for a couple of hours and tell you all the God story.
Oh man.
Throughout all of this, like, we were great friends and were involved in a prayer group at a previous church, but we were still connected. Even though we weren't going to that church,
Right.
we were still connected to those prayer warriors. And we had reached out to them to ask them to be praying, having no idea that this couple that we were asking to pray knew exactly, like, we were having the conversation and they're like, oh my gosh, Russ is getting Brandon's kidney. Their daughter, Marlena, was great friends with Brandon in school.
Wow.
And Marlena was bullied in school, and they said that Brandon was her protector. Not having any idea. Then another story, a nurse that took care of Stephen and Russ when we were in the hospital on the transplant floor. We were on different wings. They weren't in rooms next to each other. So typically when a nurse is taking care of a patient, your patients are all there in the rooms together. You wouldn't have a patient down this end of the hallway on this wing and way down at the other wing. And the nurse had come in. It was change of shift that morning, and she had come in, and the transplant team had just come around to check on him and do their rounds. And Russ is sharing the story with any and everybody that would listen, And she was on her way out of the room, and we were talking to the transplant team, and she stood at the door and just was listening to the conversation. And she turned around, and you could see a chair right there. And she said, Brandon was my friend.
Wow.
And she hadn't even been scheduled to work that day, but I guess somebody had called in sick. And so she took the shift. So I was like, that's a God wink right there.
I mean,
you know, and
none of this
But then
is
be assigned also to both
to
of
both of us
instead
on
of just that
opposite
wing.
wings.
You know?
And I mean, and I could tell you story after story after story, like, you have to believe in God. There are no coincidences, you know, how God just had his hand in all of it.
And she was in recovery as well.
wow. When I hear these stories, I just think like God is just saying like, Amanda, I see you. You know, like I see him and I'm in this. And the people that are like being impacted by him and the sacrifices and man, you guys, thank you for sharing that. And praise God that that kidney works out for both of you. And I would love to know, you know, you got the kidney. How did y'all connect after this? Did y'all meet? Did you
We did.
you were
in
going to the same
typical
church,
things,
but
we didn't know each other. Even though we went to the same church, we did not know one another. And typically in situations like this, the recipient is allowed to write a letter to the donor's
okay.
family. And typically they have you wait a year. And if both parties want to meet, then they connect you. But she had reached out and, I'm trying to remember. It was only a few months, if
It was
that long.
It was August 24th. It was my mom's birthday.
Wow.
Okay, well, it was only a couple
Only a
of
month.
months. A month.
A month.
Yeah,
Month and a week.
because Brandon's official day of death was July 15th, 2019, 1 year to the day from the day of his baptism. Yeah.
I don't know that I knew that 1 year to the day.
Yep. I didn't even realize it until, because I had to turn all the notifications off on my phone. I didn't even remember, but I remember that morning, out of nowhere, I got a notification that I shouldn't have gotten. And it was a Facebook memory of Brandon's baptism at Temple Baptist Church in Anderson.
I had an important God part.
Okay.
So they, you know, all the concern over me being a match or whatnot.
Right.
I could tell that, like the doctors, the nurses, they weren't outright telling me, but I could tell they were amazed. You know, there was something going on here.
Right.
So I had picked up that, I may not have been a perfect match. So when I went back in for a follow-up visit, I think this was after I was doing pretty good, after recovery and all. I think it was about a month later, whatever. I went back in and I was talking to the coordinator, that checks me in for the appointments and whatnot. And, I asked her, I said, can you tell me how many markers that I matched? And she said, sure. She types up and she just kind of stopped and she just looked at her screen for a minute. And she said, you're a match. So that told me right there that I hadn't met all the markers. It come to find out that I had met 3 of 12.
Wow.
And they had told me also that, I'd be on a heavy regimen of medication, and that, not to be concerned, because if my body began to reject, there were all kind of adjustments they could make to the medicine. They felt like they could, manage me through it, basically, is what they had told me. And as it turns out, I know it was God.
Yeah.
Because number one, just the miracle of both of us getting that kidney. I know for sure I was not a complete match. I'm taking the absolute minimum dosage of medicine that I can be on and and for my body not to reject it. And I have no ill effects from the medication whatsoever. Can't even tell I've taken medication. At first, I shook a little bit. So they changed, like an immediate release to an extended release on the medication, and that went away. That's the only complication, if you can call it that I've ever had. If you can call that a complication, you know. So I mean, I've been completely assured that God's hand was all over this, because I know that I wasn't. I think if it had been any other situation, actually, I'm not sure they would have given me that kid.
Wow.
I'm not sure they wouldn't have looked. If it was like a similar situation, it wasn't a Manhattan designated the both of us as recipients. If it was different than that, I think I probably would have been passed for the next person that was a better match. But God just had his hand in all of it.
I was speechless in some of this, because it's just like, you guys are connected forever, and God truly orchestrated his hands on this, and so many people, have played a part. And man, if you get Miss Beth to pray, things happen. I tell you what, I've learned that this past year with my stepdad, and I'm so grateful that in that moment, as you were grieving and as you were trying to figure out, what to do next, and, and these organ donations, like, he put people around you because he knew that you needed it and you needed to borrow faith. And what was it like for you, just kind of watching this unravel and seeing these matches come to play? What was that like for you?
Well, I wasn't privileged to the matching details or anything that they experienced. We were in two different hospitals. I just knew that they shared the same blood type, and the coordinator and the doctor said, "We're going to give it a go." And I just thought, okay, well, that's that. I mean, I started to panic a little bit in the aftermath of the decision. Because as humans, we get in our own way. And I started to think, I don't even know these people. This is my son. This is my firstborn. Like, this is the most precious gift God's ever given me. What if he saves the life of horrible people? What if I've just made a huge mistake? I mean, I really started to spiral, and it went away after a few minutes. And I just knew, that the fabric of the new picture that was being painted, I knew who the artist was. And I knew that even though things were happening out of order for me, I just was so reminded by how blessed I was, how blessed I am to have had something so precious in my life to lose like that. Some people don't ever get that. But I knew, I just kept telling myself over and over, I just kept repeating, God's plan is the only ultimate truth. What I prayed for Brandon, I prayed for healing, and I prayed for salvation. I prayed for redemption. I prayed for recovery. And I got every single one of those prayers answered. It just didn't look like I thought it was going to. Yeah. Wow.
Before we close, I've been thinking about this. Sometimes I struggle when people say, everything happens for a reason. I just personally struggle with that. And because sometimes we just live in a dark world, and things happen. But I do believe that God shows himself through pain. And I've seen that in my own life. And we all have this toolbox, right? And so we have tools that we were born with, and then life gives us tools that we didn't ask for. I have tools in my toolbox that I want to get rid of, but I have them because I've experienced hardship, and I've experienced some really tough things. And you both have tools in your toolbox that you didn't ask for. but you have him. And so I guess as we close, I just kind of want to ask, like, how have you seen God? It's been some time. You said 7 years.
Mm-hmm. 7 years in July.
7 years in July. And how have you seen God over the years, and how have you used this tool even whenever you didn't want to? I'd love to hear that.
Most of all is knowing that God is real. I have other reminders in my life, but this by far is the biggest. Just knowing that no matter what we face, no matter what we're going through, knowing that God's in control and he truly does want the best for us. And he's got, and he does have good plans, and, I really believe in the confidence every day. Like the average recipient, lives for 13 years.
Wow.
And I'm 7 years into that, but I have no doubt. Of course I'm going, God would have me to go anyway, but I have no doubt, that if he chooses for me to live a long life, my kidney will last. Brandon's kidney will last me to the end of days. There's no doubt about that. And there's no question in my mind whatsoever, whether my life would be shortened by an hour by the fact that I had a transplant.
Yeah.
I mean, over and above the fact that, I know my life was immediately lengthened. I knew that, but even talking 13 years, I don't even think that really doesn't enter into my mind. I will live just as long as God intended me to live from the beginning. Even though that I have a transplanted kidney. I mean, it's part of me, works perfectly, works better than my 2 kidneys ever worked on their own, So, I'm just thankful that it was part of God's perfect will.
And this story, like, you can relate to people who have been through similar situations that I can't or other people can't. And I've even seen you guys both in our small group as you share about this, and it just greatly encourages people's faith, or just to look at life differently and have just a strong perspective. And so I have been personally impacted every time I've had the privilege of hearing your side of the story in group. And what about you, Karen?
Oh, goodness. Well, number one, I think it makes you thankful and grateful, even through the hard times. I mean, there's so much negativity in the world, and sometimes I like to call it, I'll get stinking thinking,
I love that.
But then God has to remind me, of what he brought me through. And, that was a time in our life that I'll have to say, I had the perfect peace of God throughout that circumstance. Like, I didn't know how it was going to turn out. I didn't know if he was going to be a match, if he was going to get the kidney, or what the plan was going to be while we were going through it. But I just had a peace like I've never had, that whatever was to be would be. And God just gave me a peace about it.
Wow.
And if you've ever had the peace of God, then you know what I'm talking about. It's a hard thing to explain to folks, when you're going through a hardship or going through a trial, how you can have peace during that. But I will have to say that is one area or a time in our life that God just gave me complete peace. I never doubted. I never questioned.
Wow.
I wasn't stressed. I don't know how to explain it. I just had perfect peace about it.
And that's so the opposite of, like, it's like your mind would be filled with doubt, when it comes to a situation like that. So that's pretty amazing, profound. It only points to God. And so, Amanda, I'd love to just hear just where you're at today, and, the tools that you have now, and how you doing?
I'm doing well.
Yeah.
Blessed and definitely favored. I can say that. The first few years, following Brandon's death were really, really hard. Like
Yeah.
just basic functionality was hard.
That.
And COVID hit right after that. So it was like the perfect storm. And, so the isolation started to feel really comfortable and I was all alone. I had another kid off at college, another kid that was out doing his own thing in life. And my story really could have taken a different turn quite a few times.
Yeah.
But by the grace of God, I'm still here. And my living children, I still have Maddie and Steven, and they are both doing well. And by every standard that we know, my family is thriving. And I know a lot of people couldn't say that sitting 7 years beyond the death of one of their children. There are quite a few mothers that I met shortly after it happened that some of them can't leave the house and others are no longer with us. There are a lot of people that can't live with it. But I did say some pretty big prayers for myself. I normally pray a lot for other people. And every now and then I would catch myself praying for myself that I needed a miracle too. And witnessing the miracle that God had done with Russ and Stephen and what he did with the life that my son still had to give. That's nothing but a miracle. And even people who don't believe in God, they also can't deny it's him either because it's just such an incredible story to tell. So my life today, I would say, is the trifecta. We have Russ's miracle and Stephen's miracle, and my life is nothing short of a miracle now too.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And from my knowledge, you've helped other moms as well, who've been through similar situations. Is that right?
I have, yeah. I don't know, my social media messengers are just always filled with people who need to talk, or they need to know where resources are, or they just need an ear to bend that won't judge them. And I try to be that for other moms because when it was me, I really didn't have anyone to fill that role for me. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to turn. I didn't know what had to be done. And I certainly didn't know once I had that list together how I was going to get it there. But fortunately now the resources, the list is a lot longer than it was back then. And there are a lot of people that I've been blessed to be able to lead into recovery who are living successful lives too.
Well, I just want to thank you all so much for coming on today. And I again feel so humbled and honored that you guys would sit in my office studio and share this story with me and take the time out of your busy schedules. And my faith is encouraged. I just want to keep going and living strong and living for God, and hearing stories like this just drives me and forward. And I think it gives hope to those who are suffering or having loved ones who suffer. And just thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. And y'all are awesome.
No, we're honored to be here.
Awesome.
It's a story that needs to continue to be told.
That's right. Well, thank you guys so much.